It was one of those evenings where the world felt unbearably heavy, as though every streetlight was dimmer and every step dragged like lead. A young woman named Aisha stood at the edge of the crowded bus stop, her fingers trembling as she searched through her worn-out handbag. A few coins rattled inside, but they were nowhere near enough for the fare. The buses screeched in and out, their doors swinging open to swallow passengers rushing home, but she stood frozen, heart pounding with embarrassment. Everyone else had somewhere to be, someone waiting for them. But for her, home felt far away, and even the bus ride there was a luxury she couldn't afford tonight. The cruel truth settled in her chest, she didn't even have enough to sit on the seat of a rattling bus, something most people never thought twice about. Backhand index pointing right if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of small gestures to change lives. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Spark. Your support helps us spread these stories of humanity further. Aisha pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though it did little against the cold evening wind. Her eyes followed the glow of the buses fading into the distance, each one carrying people closer to warmth, family, and food. She hadn't eaten much all day, just half a piece of bread in the morning, because the little money she had went toward her younger brother's school fees. That boy, barely 10 years old, was the reason she pushed herself through every struggle. Their mother had passed away years ago, and their father, once strong and dependable, had been bedridden after a stroke. In many ways, Aisha had become both sister and mother, daughter and provider, all while still in her early 20s. Life had taught her to sacrifice quietly, but tonight, when her last few rupees fell short, she felt the humiliation sting deeper than usual. She began to walk. The distance from the bus stop to her small rented room was over an hour by foot, and the path wasn't safe once darkness swallowed the streets. Her shoes were worn thin, the soles barely holding together, and each step echoed her exhaustion. But what choice did she have? Pride kept her from begging for help. People already looked at her with pity, she couldn't bear to hear another dismissive sigh or see another stranger's eyes roll at her misfortune. So she lowered her head and started down the road, deciding she would simply endure. That was when the last bus of the evening pulled up beside her, its brakes hissing loudly. The driver leaned out the window and called for the remaining passengers. She stopped for a moment, tempted, but shook her head. She couldn't afford it. The driver noticed her hesitation. He was an older man, his hair silvering at the edges, his face lined with years of early mornings and long nights on the road. Something about her tired frame and defeated expression caught his attention. He waited a moment longer, then, almost instinctively, opened the door and called to her again. Still, she didn't move. She didn't want to face the humiliation of admitting she had no fare. The driver sighed, pulled the bus a little closer, and said gently, "Daughter, where are you going? It's getting late." His tone wasn't harsh, just kind, like a father worried for his child. Aisha's throat tightened. For a second, she wanted to lie, to make an excuse, but the weight of the day had drained her of all energy. She whispered, so softly he almost couldn't hear, "I don't have the money." For many, that confession would have been met with cold indifference. But the driver's eyes softened. He motioned for her to get inside, assuring her it was fine. At first, she shook her head, still bound by her pride. But when he insisted, his voice firm yet filled with compassion, she finally stepped onto the bus. Her legs felt weak as she sank into a seat near the back. The few remaining passengers barely paid her any attention, lost in their own tired worlds. But Aisha's eyes welled with tears she tried to hide. It wasn't just the ride, it was the dignity of being treated like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible. As the bus rattled through the streets, she stared out the window, watching neon signs blur into streaks of color. The driver glanced back at her reflection in the mirror now and then. Something about her reminded him of his own daughter, who was married and lived in another city. He thought of how he would want someone to help her if she were ever in need. Compassion, he believed, was the only true wealth a man could carry. When the bus reached the end of the route, the few passengers had already departed. Aisha stood to leave as well, embarrassed that she had taken even this much. But the driver stopped her, asking where she lived. She hesitated, unsure if she should reveal her address. He gently explained that it was late and dangerous for a young woman to walk alone from here. She realized he wasn't just offering kindness, he was offering safety. So with a quiet voice, she told him the name of her neighborhood. Without hesitation, he nodded and started the bus again, even though it was far out of his way. The ride to her home was silent but strangely comforting. The empty bus felt like a moving sanctuary, a shelter from the loneliness and harshness of the world outside. She watched the driver's hands steady on the wheel, guiding her closer to home. For once, she didn't feel entirely alone. By the time they reached her street, she couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She whispered a thank you that carried the weight of every struggle, every sleepless night, every sacrifice she had endured. It was more than gratitude for a bus ride, it was gratitude for being seen, for being cared for when she had nothing to give in return. The driver simply smiled, as though it was the most natural thing in the world, and told her to take care of herself. As she stepped off the bus and watched it disappear into the night, she realized something profound. Sometimes, the smallest gestures could breathe life back into a weary soul. That night, Aisha went inside, hugged her brother a little tighter, and silently promised herself she would keep pushing forward. Because if strangers could show such kindness, then maybe the world wasn't as cruel as it often seemed. Over the following weeks, life didn't suddenly transform into perfection. The struggles remained, the unpaid bills, the long hours, the endless responsibilities. But she carried that moment with her, like a candle in the dark. Whenever despair whispered in her ear, she remembered the driver's kindness and it gave her strength. She began to believe that no matter how heavy life became, there would always be someone, somewhere, who cared enough to help. And what about the driver? For him, it was just another day, another small act of humanity in a long career. But what he didn't know was that his single gesture had rekindled hope in a young woman's heart, hope that would ripple through her life and, in time, inspire her to do the same for others. Because kindness is never wasted. It moves forward, passed from one soul to another, often when we least expect it. Backhand index pointing right. If this story has touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who might need a reminder of kindness, and subscribe to Kindness Spark Park to keep spreading hope. Your engagement allows these stories to reach more people who need light in their darkest days. Cherry Blossom special request, comment below with the words, "Kindness lives on," if you believe even the smallest gesture can change someone's world. Cherry Blossom. Aisha's story reminds us that we never truly know the battles others are fighting. A few coins, a ride home, a kind word, it might mean little to us but everything to someone else. And sometimes, one person's simple act can change the course of another person's night, their week, or even their life. Let this be a reminder that we each hold the power to be that one person. We each hold the power to make the world gentler, one kind choice at a time.